is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Touched by Downing, swinging. There's a drive into left center field. That ball has got to be out of here. It's gone. It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time. And it's
ABC's Monday Night Baseball, live from Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts.
He is fading, looking. He's under the gun. He's fired, he throws. It is.
This is baseball, Major League Baseball. And this is Mel Allen.
Touchdown! Oh, my!
The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat.
Goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier!
Well, it's that time of week again, everybody, for the Past Our Prime podcast. Very happy to once again have the Hoffman brothers here with me, Billy and Mark, Bill Mahoney and Mark Hoffman. How you guys been doing?
I'm doing great, but Bill was such a brat as a little brother, man.
I was that hyphen Hoffman Mahoney thing, Oh,
I had to beat him down a lot.
He did.
You guys are kind of like DeVito and Schwarzenegger.
Exactly.
I'll let you.
Let
you decide who's who.
Who's who?
I think we know who I am.
Loved you in Taxi.
Thank you.
We won't name names, but you were great in Throw Mama from the Train.
I'll be back. That's Marty. Go.
Oh God.
As we do here on the Past Our Prime podcast, we go back and we look at sports from 50 years ago through the prism of old issues of Sports Illustrated, 1 week at a time. And we've had great fun so far with some great guests in our first couple months. Larry Zonka and Lee Steinberg, Mark Cram Jr., Larry Farmer. They've all been sensational.
Getting a lot of good feedback on it too.
Good.
I mean, to me, so far, the Bob Thomas stories about Walter Payton and then the Larry Farmer stories are just, and they're so animated that when you listen to them back, you go, God, those guys are fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, it's always when there's a surprise. Like, when I threw out that Mannix trivia, I had no idea that, Larry Farmer's folks, that was their favorite show, and they actually got to go on the set. That caught me completely off guard. That's what makes it so great.
Absolutely, right? You don't want to ask questions that you know the answers to.
Exactly. We're not lawyers here.
Right. So this issue, it seems like it's kind of funny. UCLA wins 7 national titles in a row. And we're going to continue to talk about when they lose games.
That's right. And
they lost like 3 games in a span of 4 years or so. And we're going to talk about 2 of them because the cover of this week's Sports Illustrated, it's called UCLA's Lost Weekend because they didn't lose 1 game. They lost 2 games in a row. It's truly 50 years later, shocking. Still.
Yes.
Of course, they lost to Notre Dame back last month, and that's when we had Coach Farmer on. And this week, they went up to Oregon, and they lost at Oregon State, and then they lost at Oregon. And on the cover is Oregon's center, Gerald Willett, getting a rebound in between a couple of Bruins guys and
including that Walton dude. I don't know what happened to him.
Yeah, he didn't do much.
He didn't amount to much.
No. So we will be talking with that center from the Oregon Ducks, Gerald Willett, momentarily as we relive what has to be the greatest moment of his basketball career. I mean, I was thinking about that. This guy has the best moment maybe of his professional amateur life on the cover of Sports Illustrated. How phenomenal is that? It's etched in stone for forever. Because I wouldn't have known who Gerald Willett is, but there he is, right there on the cover. So,
and how much does that means so much to him? Because Bill Walton, he went to Portland, went to Boston. He ended up being on Sports Illustrated a bunch of other times, obviously with UCLA. Willett, one shot, man. Yeah. And so every time you go somewhere with kids, grandkids, you go, yeah, that's your grandpa. That's just so cool. Yeah.
So we'll be talking to him momentarily. But let's start first with the scorecard portion of the magazine. Mark, you got anything that jumps out at you?
I got a couple things that jump out at me here. I thought that were really interesting, the Larry Looper story, who Crosby Field was the Cincinnati Reds' home before Riverfront Stadium, before Great America Ballpark. It was this old ballpark that got torn down like around 71, and he took a part of that and moved it over to his Kentucky farm. And so before there was Field of Dreams, before there was that Iowa baseball diamond, there was this guy in Kentucky that had a bit of Crosby Field, in his backyard.
And if you build it, they didn't come
No,
because
they
I've
didn't.
never heard of it.
No.
No, and he did. I mean, if you look at it, he bought the fences, seats, the advertising. The manager was Bernie Tebbetts. He bought the dugout where there was a little hole back there. They found out that the manager smoked and blew the smoke through there. This wasn't just one thing. He bought everything.
Wow. Nice.
And then, shockingly enough, a guy came in and bought it from him and bulldozed it over.
No way.
Bulldozed it over.
Yeah, in the 80s it was gone. So it was the one that left. But that'd be kind of neat. You go in your backyard, let's go play some baseball, and you got
Absolutely. Like wiffle ball, right? Would be awesome to have like this smaller park there.
Well, if you think about it, maybe when the A's eventually are out of Oakland, you might be able to get some of that Coliseum. You can, Scott, you can build it here in Pasadena.
I could get some of their plumbing issues and take it back to my house back east.
There you go.
Could use some help right about now. I liked this one because it talks about Tommy Smith of the Indians broke his arm in the offseason playing basketball. And two of his teammates, Buddy Bell and Frank Duffy, also got ankle injuries playing hoops. And I believe either the year before, maybe the same year, John Reeves, who was a quarterback in the NFL, and Brad Van Pelt, a linebacker, both had big injuries playing basketball. So baseball used to have clauses saying, if you guys did this, and then they got rid of those clauses, and everyone was just up in arms because these guys are getting hurt. Of course, now they have those clauses. You can't, cross the street anymore without, because wasn't that the whole Jeff Kent controversy
when
he got hurt?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And they tried to hide what he was doing, but basically I think he was riding a motorcycle and he crashed it and he got hurt. And
Didn't Tatis do the same thing with the Padres? He was.
That's right.
And he broke his wrist and tried to cover it and say, no, it's working out.
Because he did it on a golf cart or something like that.
Yeah.
He crashed a golf cart.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd love to see Ohtani's contract because I'd love to see all the little clauses. You can't cross the street between 5 and 7 p.m. because there might be extra traffic there or stuff like that. So there's probably these extra cautious clauses in there.
Sure.
And by the way, I made that up, so don't start all of a sudden saying, really? Ohtani can't cross the street between 5 and 7? So, but I'm just saying there's probably these little clauses in there just to make sure that, the athlete does. If you're going to hurt yourself doing the sport you're getting paid for.
Here's one for you. We've all been to spring training. We've all seen balls go over the fence, right? And we pick them up. Well, poor Fred Spiller. He was found guilty of petty larceny for keeping a ball that was hit over a fence in an intra-city game in Wichita, Kansas. Okay, so he's fined $100. Or he could have been fined $100. Or the judge said, you can shag balls over at the Little League. He said no, and then he took him to court. And the court cost would have been over $300. So I think he eventually ended up paying $100. So think about that. You catch a ball, you get arrested.
Right. Right, because you keep the ball that's hit towards your truck or something like that.
One day in spring training out in Arizona, they're doing batting practice before the game, long before the game. The ball goes over the fence. I walked over and picked it up, and this guy runs over and goes, drop it! And so I freeze. He goes, you can't touch that ball. So I don't know, maybe in Arizona they still arrest you, but this poor Fred Spiller, man.
Right. And the funny thing was, you think that, go shag some balls.
Yeah,
that sounds fun,
even
right?
more fun.
But his lawyer said something to the effect of, hey, we didn't do anything wrong, and now you're trying to make a clown out of him, having him go shag balls. So Fred wasn't having any of that.
Couldn't he have just stolen another ball when he shagged it? I mean, then he goes.
Right.
Then that's
Well, you know,
execution.
penitentiary.
Yeah, he's done.
I might get in trouble here because I can't remember who my cameraman was, but in 1984 we were in the Tigers clubhouse when they were in Anaheim, and we stole a couple balls that had autographs on
You
them.
son of a bitch.
So I could be a wanted man.
I'm outta here.
Excuse
Yes,
me.
America's Most Wanted. There's me.
LAPD? Yeah, it's Bill.
No, Detroit PD. We
Detroit,
need to-
okay. Eddie Murphy then.
Oh,
They-
man. Here we go. True confessions.
Yes. I have the ball still
son of
somewhere.
a-
Hey, they won the World Series that year. It's probably got some value.
Yeah.
What I love is the they said it, section,
Yep,
on
yep.
this. And Bill Stoneman,
Yeah.
who was the Montreal Expos pitcher, on why he did not use an agent to negotiate his contract, he said, quote, "You don't need a lawyer to tell the club you had a lousy year."
So true. So true. Now, I bet you Mr. Stoneman did not keep that same way of thinking
No.
once he became the general manager
No,
of
no.
Angels.
Yes.
You had a lousy year.
No,
I can see that.
I could say, Max Scherzer going in, I was hurt most of last year. How about I give you $10 million back? It's not happening.
Right?
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, I will say Bill Stoneman was the GM when the Angels won the World Series, so he's got that going for him.
Yeah. Super nice guy. Well, like I said earlier, we seem to be focusing a lot on UCLA losses because they happened so infrequently back there. But ambushed on the Oregon Trail, not since 1966, 2 years before yours truly was born, had UCLA lost consecutive games. But as they said in the magazine, when UCLA loses one game, it's a big deal. But to lose two in a row, unheard of. Their 88-game winning streak snapped at Notre Dame back in January. And now, at this point, this was the weird thing. Because so few teams went to the NCAA tournament, they were in danger of not only not repeating as champions for the 8th straight year, but not even making the tournament.
And that's really weird when you're 18-3 to think, you
Right.
might not make the tournament.
Right. As it turns out, I think they ended up having to play for the conference title against USC. It was kind of like they would have gone at that point anyway, because I don't think they lost another game.
They didn't.
No.
But they ended up playing SC at the sports arena and killing them, so they did make the tournament. But
What I love though is the page where they have the ambush on the Oregon Trail, and it's like the end zone point of view, and you can see the crowd completely behind the players, and it's so neat because this is such a 1974 crowd looking at the hair and the styles of people, because the crowd dominates that scene almost more so than the players, and it's a lot of bad hair and a lot of bad clothes, but
I thought this was great. The senior Greg Lee, he was not starting anymore. I think he was a starter and then wasn't
Tommy
a starter.
Curtis, I think, took over. Yeah.
And he suggested that it was the people who weren't playing that might be causing this. So in other words, he was kind of blaming the coaching.
Yeah. He said they were playing better when I was in the lineup.
Yeah.
I'm surprised Wooden allowed that to be
Right?
said, or at least allowed that to get out.
Well, imagine if you had social media back then. It was like, Wood in trouble, players rebelling,
But to me, the crazy part, UCLA obviously lost the 2 games. 8 years prior, they lost 2 straight games. It was once again against Oregon and Oregon State.
Well,
just
it's
crazy.
a tough place to play.
Yeah,
It really, it's small court. The
Yeah.
fans are right on top of the court.
Has
which is why that
anyone been
picture-
there? Have any of us ever been to a game there? Have you?
No.
Okay.
And I don't want the court they have now, because the court they have in Eugene now is so blinding. It's like the trees on the court, and you don't know where the court is. And when the
Okay.
trees begin, it's just like I get a headache just looking at the court.
The Ducks were a great team. They really were. They came at you defensively over and over and over again. And an opposing coach said of them, they're like a squad of kamikazes. And Oregon coach Dick Harder adopted the term the kamikaze kids. That they played this relentless, rough style. When you played them, you were going to be battered and bruised. You may beat them, but you were going to know you were in a fight. So, in fact, a year earlier, when the Bruins were in Eugene, a fan ran onto the court, Billy,
And kicked Bill Walton. Yes. I mean, in a game.
Bill and I have this thing where we'll go, hey, I give for $1.50, go climb up that flagpole, or go do something like you'll never do.
Yeah.
So that's probably what happened. Some guy in the crowd said, hey, I'll give you $1 if you go run and kick Walton in the shin.
Yeah, that's right.
And he had enough. He had enough beers. He said, okay.
It's all mine.
Some guy, a sophomore named Bruce Codron, comes out on fire in this game. He hits his 8 of his first 9 shots, finishes with 24 points. Oregon led by 9 with 6:43 and went into what was called back then a 4 corners offense. They stalled. Dean Smith was famous for this at North Carolina. And they would hold on for a 56-51 win. The floor was crazy. Now we see people rush the floor all the time.
Right.
It can be a basically a nothing game, and that happens. But back then,
but what's so amazing is the Ducks the week before had lost by 18 at UCLA, and the night before, and again, remember back then at the Pac-8, you played Friday and Saturday night. You didn't have these days off, and that Friday night they'd lost to USC by 15. So these 2 games they had lost to come back and then to beat UCLA the way they did was pretty remarkable.
yeah.
And also because I think looking back, Oregon had lost like 5 in a row. And they averaged points by 13. So for them to actually come in and then be able to beat UCLA was even more of a shock. Not the fact that they beat them wasn't a shock. The fact they had come in on a losing streak and not looking that good.
Codron said afterwards, when you see those UCLA players, you think they are gods. Then you play them and you know they are people like the rest of us. So that comes back to what we had talked about with Digger Phelps when he had his team practice cutting down the nets in hopes that his team would beat UCLA, because you had to convince your players first off that you could do it before you could do it. You know what I mean? If they came in there thinking, we can't beat these guys, you're in trouble. So you're right. Having lost these games in a row, having been blown out by UCLA, and then coming and winning the rematch is pretty unbelievable.
I mean, a lot of times you were just saying it. A lot of times these teams come in against higher ranked opponents and they're already lost. They walk in and go, look how tall they are. Look at all this. Oregon didn't do that. No. They looked at UCLA and thought, oh, we can beat this team.
In order to beat UCLA back in the day, it took a collective effort. You had to get it from everyone. Like I mentioned earlier, Bruce Codron comes out and just is on fire. Hits 8 of 9 shots, finishes with 24 points. They had a great player in Ron Lee, and then they did it collectively. The Kamikaze Kids were known for their toughness and their defense, and the center of that joins us now, Gerald Willett, the center who went up against All-American Bill Walton. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today on the Past Our Prime podcast.
Sure, I'm glad to be here. How are you folks doing today?
We're doing just great.
Great.
Yes, I have Bill and Mark here as well. And like I mentioned earlier, or Bill did, Mark is a big UCLA fan and grad, and you really put a dent in his childhood. So we can thank you for that, Gerald.
I hope it didn't traumatize you too much.
Actually, to be honest, the worst one was, and it was a few years later, Oregon came down to Pauley Pavilion, and they beat UCLA,
Ballard, yes.
65-45. And we were just stunned. No one came into our house, not only beat us, but beat us by 20 points. It was a beatdown by the Ducks.
Yeah. So I want to ask you first off, Gerald, 50 years later, and I have to think there are a lot of things about that night that you remember, but is there one thing that stands out?
I think it was the vulnerability of the Bruins. They did not seem to be their normal selves that night. They didn't seem to be unconquerable. Fact is, they seemed scared. They seemed scared the second they came in, and we started the game, and I even made a comment to Bill about how scared they were, and we were going to beat them. I knew you couldn't come into Matt Court and play scared. It just didn't work. There's too much pressure there.
Did losing to the Oregon State the night before help you guys? Did that maybe ruin their psyche?
I'm sure it had something to do with it, because they came in at the start of that game, and I know Matt Court was a little intimidating, but they literally They literally seemed to be scared.
How could you sense that?
Oh, I could see the first time we were at the free throw line, I was next to Bill, and he was shaking. He was that scared. I could see him shaking. I'd never seen him shake before. That's when I made the comment, because I thought, wow, you are really scared. I'd seen other people come into Matt Court, especially freshmen from other places, and they were scared. They'd actually shake. Once in a while, our freshmen would be scared and shaking, and I'd have to look at them and yell at them to breathe, and then they'd take a big breath and realize that they'd been holding their breath.
What was it about your home court that would do that to opposing teams?
Oh, I think it was a combination of the way we played and our fans. I think our fan base, I think Matt Court was the highest rated gym in history. I read that somewhere one time, that we were rated at a 6-point differential just because of Matt Court.
Weren't the fans like right on top of the court? I mean, it was like just inches between the.
Yeah, right on top. The student bleachers were probably 18 inches from the edge of the court. Wow. I mean, you had enough to put your feet down, but you run by, and I know once in a while they'd let the opposing team run around their feet. They'd be trying to stick their feet out there, and I think they moved the bleachers back just a little bit one year, but I don't remember which year that was.
Well, we were talking about the year before that a fan ran out on the court and kicked Bill Walton. So, I mean, it seems like that place is a little tougher place to play.
Yeah, you didn't want to get off the court. The fans had a tendency to grab people. I know. I actually witnessed one time. I think they were pinching Bill when I ran by. I think I yelled, "Let him go," because one guy had his arm hooked, and the other, I think it was a girl, was pinching his leg. I saw him actually pinching him.
You know, you held what many people say is the greatest college basketball player of all time, Bill Walton, to just 11 points. How did you as a team, and you in particular, go into that game with a game plan, and how did you execute it?
I was awful small for a center in those days, and I'd been practicing defense in a different way, of actually playing defense before my man got the ball, because it was too late. Everybody was so much bigger and heavier than me that I could not let them post up, get the ball. They were just scoring too easy. So I was playing defense a little different than everybody by denying the ball, serious denial. Sometimes I'd front, sometimes I'd three-quarters, sometimes I'd mix it up so much that he couldn't really put his weight on and post on me really easy, or I'd jump around in front. And what really allowed us to do that is that my teammates were really helping on the weak side. They would they'd be ready for the lob, and we'd go after that first one, and then they'd quit. And we knew we had to stop that first lob, and then they quit throwing the thing, and I could get away with a quick front and then jump back around behind. And I was quicker than most of the centers, so that's the way I played most people. I just had to play a little harder when I played Bill.
You were 6'8.5", right? So you had to use your quickness, right?
Yeah, I was 6'8.5", and oh gosh, I started as a sophomore at about 215, but I ended that first season at 205. I think by my senior year, I was in the season at about 215 was all.
I was going to ask you.
I was kind of lightweight too.
I was going to ask you, in that game, you guys were up by 6 at halftime, but UCLA actually took the lead in the second half. Mm-hmm. At any point, did you worry that now that UCLA had taken this lead, that now it was all going to go south for you guys?
Oh, that probably crossed my mind, but I shoved it right back out and went right back to executing what we were doing before, which is throwing over the top of that zone and heading down the floor as fast as we could before the rest of their team got there. Because that's what really made them so good with that zone. They could throw Bill back there all by himself, and he'd guard the basket, and the other four guys would be up on the front court pressing the crud out of how many ever guys. You couldn't, you got too crowded up there to put more than three guys, so their press seemed to work against everybody. But once we threw over the top and started going, and Oregon State the night before had beat them by Paul Miller shooting from that wing spot. And we had a guy, Bruce Coldren, who could do the same thing. So Harder told us we were going over the top and going down the floor. I got to actually kind of be the point guard. I promised him I wouldn't take more than 1 or 2 dribbles, and I'd get rid of the ball, though, which I did. I was throwing it down the court, trying to put the pressure on Walton.
You know, one of the heroes of that game was Bruce Codron, and man, he picked a hell of a game to catch fire, didn't he?
Didn't he? Yeah, that was, I won't say by far Bruce's best game, but it was his biggest impact game. He had a couple other games that were good, but that one, he hit the shots when we needed him, and we'd have never won that game without Bruce. We just didn't have that many shooters on the team. We didn't have somebody we could replace him with.
Now talking about the cover of the Sports Illustrated, a lot of people expected it to be Codron, but then surprisingly, it was you. What was your first reaction when you saw your picture on the SI?
They eulogized Bruce last week at
Yep.
the Arizona game. Let's make sure we get his name right. It's Coldren.
Thank you.
Codron.
I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah,
sorry about
just-
that. Thank you.
Just because I think his wife might listen.
No, that's true.
Absolutely.
We knew that one of us was on the cover, and we all just knew it was Bruce, including myself. I was just sure it was him. After hitting 12 of 14?
12 of 14.
12 of 14?
Mhm.
Yeah, I just figured that, America was watching basketball. What they were selling in basketball at the time was the offensive prowess of people, finesse basketball. And that really wasn't us. And I thought they'd put Bruce on the cover just because of that. I didn't think they'd put a defensive guy on the cover. I just never entered my mind.
Now, what did you think of your picture? I mean, did you go, wow, that's a great pose of me holding the ball up high like that? But then
Yes.
but then my left arm's covering half my face. I mean, what did you think?
That's exactly what I thought. I thought, what a shot for posterity. There I am in the middle of a great game, and I got my arm over my face. And it was kind of fitting. It was, I think they picked that on purpose. It was kind of like we were the unknown people just coming in and you see Bill and who was it? Turgovich?
I think it's Turgovich.
Number 25?
Yeah, standing there kind of gawking at me, but I think that's what they were trying to say was like they got caught looking and watching instead of, playing. It wasn't, I don't know that the picture was so much about me than it was about UCLA and how they have a tendency to just watch right then.
Well, it's a great shot because of the look on all the players' faces and you just dominating the boards. It's got to make you feel good about that.
Yeah, I wish they'd have caught it at a peak jump. It looks like I'm about 2 inches off the floor, and that was actually a big jump that I had grabbed and was just coming down with it. So
When I first mentioned and called you about being on the show, and I said we're doing a podcast on the 50 days or 50 years later you immediately knew the date of the issue because you said to me, oh, I've signed the cover of that issue so many times. It's arguably the biggest moment of your basketball life, and it is forever commemorated by being on the cover of Sports Illustrated. How crazy is that?
it's pretty exceptional. I get reminded, like you said, I get reminded of it every year, and I'm surprised people are still interested in it. We'll get a new coach at Oregon, and every time we get a new coach at Oregon, they invite down all the kamikaze kids trying to find out what the mystique it was about that team that people are still talking about and comparing teams that have better records than us and have done better than we did, why they're still comparing those teams to us. It was really, I don't know, none of those teams have had a Ronnie Lee either. there's some serious entertainment value there, yeah. I even like watching Ronnie Lee. Every once in a while, I find myself with my mouth open thinking, wow, I'd like to be able to do that.
Now, once an Oregon Duck, always an Oregon Duck. Do you, as the years went by, would you always support the program? Would you always go to the games?
Yeah, I go to games. I got hurt about 20 years ago. I had an electrical event. Had electricity run through my body for 15, 20 seconds. I was in water, so it was a serious event.
Wow.
It stopped me from doing really anything for 10, 15 years. Just the last 5 years, I've been able to move my arms and talk without stuttering. And I don't stutter. I was just getting so many electrical shocks that I just could hardly talk. But I'm fine now, and I'll stay back on course because I'm going to games again and meeting the guys at different events, and I'm back socializing again. So I'm having fun living life again.
Good.
My God,
yeah. I was all folded up in a chair for a while, like Stephen Hawking. Technically, I'm a spastic. I still have to be careful how I move. I played my Xbox playing Call of Duty because I can't be too physical. So I tore my eye doing that. I had to quit doing that. I spasmed my jaw and broke teeth. There's spasms like you wouldn't believe. Like I got to get a torque rotator cup fixed because a muscle spasm in my shoulder just reaching for the dog food.
I don't mean to get personal. Can you explain how that happened?
Yeah, I'm a property manager, so I have a lot of talent in all kinds of things. I installed a dishwasher for my mother that night before, and it was leaking the next day. Her significant other died. I was in a big hurry. I didn't turn the dishwasher off. My mom had a bunch of company coming. I popped the front off, started to tighten a valve, and my wrench hit the power, and my other hand was getting sprayed by the water. I didn't realize what a good connection I was in, and it lit me up for like 15, 20 seconds. My mother wasn't sure what to do.
You should have died.
I should have died.
Oh, my God.
I think I didn't die because it shot me right out of my body. I was standing next to a guy watching the whole thing, so it didn't even hurt. Wow. I felt hot at first, and then when it shot through my body, it just shot me right out of my body. I was standing there next to this guy watching the whole thing.
Oh, my goodness.
So did you have a cardiac arrest, or did you actually have a heart attack?
No, they say that your heart stops, but that's not true. It goes into... I was hooked up to 110. My heart was buzzing at 110. The next thing I turned to this guy, I'd had another out-of-body experience when I was in Spain, got hit by lightning in a airplane, dove 32,000 feet, and this guy walked through the pilot door, and I was like, holy cow, I'm in shock. And he gave me a life review in a little black box, and the next thing you know, I'm like, holy cow, what is going on here? And it was the same guy. I hook up the electricity, it shoots me out, and I'm standing next to the same guy. And I said, in that life review, you showed how I was going to die. It wasn't like this. I said, you and God lied to me. And that guy got so mad, I couldn't even tell you how mad he got. He reached down there because we're floating about 3 feet off the ground. He reached down there and socked me with his right hand, right here. I had that mark on my neck and chest for almost 2 weeks where he whacked me. And I instantly shot back in my body, and I was in my body spinning around out of the kitchen, through the dining room, into the living room, 25, 30 feet away, and landed at my mother's feet, who'd been running up and down, screaming at the other people to come and get me unhooked from this thing.
Oh, my God.
My God.
So
that's the story.
Did you have to go to ICU?
Literal out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
Did you have to go to ICU?
Little out-of-body experience.
Were you put in
I've
ICU
been very...
at all?
People think I've had really bad luck, but, it's taught me an amazing amount of things that when you die, you're going to be more alive than you are right now, guys. More than you are right now. Way
that's
more
one of the most
alive.
amazing stories. I mean, that's the last thing I expected to talk about you playing Bill Walton. Now I'm like speechless.
Sorry to digress.
That makes meeting UCLA like nothing.
I know.
Yeah, it was a big event in my life.
Yeah. But
the second time I was actually dead. The first time I had they cut me open trying to save me because my sinuses were blowing my brain apart. I broke my nose into my face and it scarred my sinuses. So I'd had a couple out-of-body experiences with this same guy who I know when I die, I'll be, hi, how you doing? Where are we going?
Yeah.
Wow.
Good to see you again.
I am so glad you're here, man.
I've even seen the Crystal City. Wanted to go there, and they wouldn't let me. Said I wasn't done cooking.
Wow.
Gerald, that is...
wow.
That really gives you an appreciation.
They sent me back because I'm supposed to tell everybody. I can't shut my mouth now. I have to tell everybody about how alive you're going to be when you die.
You're supposed to be on the Past Our Prime podcast to tell everybody. That's exactly right.
Right. Right.
Well, I think I'm coming into my second prime because you should have seen me 10, 15 years ago. Like I say, I was all folded up, sitting in a chair.
Oh my God.
It's interesting. It's karma because if we had done this podcast 10 or 15 years ago, you wouldn't be able to communicate
That's
with us on
right.
the podcast.
No, I'd have turned you down, guys. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have made a schedule and made the time. Maybe not, probably not.
And now you're fixing computers and getting on Zooms and doing it all.
I'm doing it again. Yeah. Doing it again.
I
had to almost re-educate myself. The only thing I didn't lose was my long-term memory. Some of it in the last, and I mean long-term, like I kind of wiped out about 20 years. All the people I met there for a period of time, I couldn't even remember their names. I couldn't remember anything.
God.
I couldn't hardly do
Did
anything.
it come back or did you have to relearn it?
Both. Both. It slowly came back, and I was relearning. I was studying all kinds of stuff. I became a YouTuber. I was studying everything on YouTube.
You sound fantastic.
Yeah.
You
So
sound amazing.
Would you say now you're what, like 75% back? What would you say you are now from before all this?
I say 66 and a third because I weighed 240 when I got zapped, and 6 months later I weighed 160.
Oh my God.
I couldn't swallow water for 6 months. I would have to trickle it down. They told me to get my affairs in order. I wouldn't make it 5 years. They were being nice. They thought I was going to die right away, I'm sure.
Oh my God.
So
Well, that took
Well,
us in a,
that's
that's a
one way not to
direction.
Let's get back to the UCLA.
Anyway,
game.
that's one reason basketball saved my life. We can get back to it
Can-
because I was in such great shape. I know. Even Stu Jackson, head of player personnel NBA, said that I was in better shape than anybody he'd ever seen at any level. And I like to be physical, and that's one of the reasons we won that game. At the end of the games, that's why I wasn't too scared when they were jumped up on us. I knew that if we were close to almost anybody in the world, that we'd bite them at the end because we were in better shape.
and in
I knew I'd get buckets at the end of the game.
And in 75, weren't you drafted by the Blazers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was. But that was a plus-minus thing, too. Bill was playing for the Blazers, and they were about to win a world championship, and Lenny Wilkins came to me because at first Lenny was kind of taking me along on the side and showing me how to turning me into a three real fast. And showing me how I could take one dribble and dunk from the edge of the court, which I didn't even have a clue about. And after 3 days, I thought I was going to make the team. I was sure of it, the way Lenny was talking to me. And the next thing you know, he came up and said, well, there's people on the team that don't really want to play with you. We can't really sign and trade you. He goes, you're going to have to play in Europe or somewhere for a while. We'll hook you up with somebody. And all of a sudden I thought that one game that we're talking about probably did me in, because I think I'd have signed with Portland right there if Walton would have played with me.
Oh, so
I
you
know
think
he did
because
not
you
like
beat him?
me at all.
Why? Because you beat him?
You know, somebody that knew Walton in Portland said that he told them that he'd been on the cover of Sports Illustrated a bunch, I want to say 13 times or some amazing amount it was, and that was the only time that he wasn't the star on the cover, and it was just kind of a bitter pill for him to swallow. That, and I don't blame him. He was a great player, and
so if you
we were not ranked in their category really. Although we had good players, we had Ballard, we had good players.
Yeah, you did.
Now, you had with Walton, did you guys talk during that game that you guys played? Was there any conversation between you two, good or bad?
No, not really. I'd never talked in a game ever. I'd never said a word to. I just didn't talk. I had a tendency to stare because I found out as an intimidating sophomore that it was a little intimidating if I stood right there and just stared at people. I mean, not even blink.
So you think if you were drafted by another team, not the Blazers, you might have then made the NBA club?
It's very, very possible. Fact is, when I came back from Spain after playing in Spain for years, I played for a coach, Aido Reneses, who became Madrid's big-time coach and ushered them into playing NBA teams because I taught him defense and he taught me how to shoot. And I came back the same player I was with a good shot. and I was going to play, and I was just telling Portland, you don't sign me, I'm going somewhere else. So they were trying to kind of control that, so they were going to do a sign and trade deal with me and give me my choice of it looked like Cleveland, Atlanta, or Detroit, and I was willing to do that. I liked Atlanta, and we were just discussing what we were going to, signing bonus. We kind of knew what I was going to make, and we were discussing the signing bonus. And 4th of July hit, and I told him I'll talk to you on the 5th. On the 4th of July, I was playing badminton, tore my left eye in half.
And there went your NBA career then.
That was that. Yeah, I lost about a third of my vision.
Oh my God.
So I was just instantly, the second I knew I'd made it, I was done just that fast.
You mentioned that you go to Barcelona and play, and once again, your timing just a little bit unfortunate, because in November of '75, the dictator Franco dies, and then you play that night, and that was a crazy night. Do you recall any of the events that took place that evening?
Oh yeah, the place was in just about a riot. They were throwing chairs on the floor. The area of Barcelona wanted to secede from the rest of Spain for a long time. And when Franco died, they were talking about it, and the Basques were just going to do it. So the whole country is in turmoil, and they had two types of police there. The traffic police, which were usually about half drunk, and you could pay them off for whatever you did. We could speed around all we wanted to. We just paid them off. And the Guardia had these little plastic triangular hats and carried machine guns, and you didn't mess with them. And they were all over the floor. Fact is, the game that night, the game that we were playing, they started chanting "Down with Franco." And the Guardia, there's probably 10 of them, and there's usually only 2 of them in the building when we're playing a game. There's 10 of them that night. They walk out on the floor. Why? It's not a timeout, but we had just come back on the floor from a timeout while they're doing this chant. And the Guardia walks out there and starts waving their machine guns like they're going to mow everybody down. And I'm about 5 feet from the guy with the machine gun. All I could think was hit the floor and belly crawl out of there as fast as I could go, and jumped over the concrete wall that was about 3 feet high, and told the coach I was peeking over, watching these guys, saying, "Hey, I'm here to play ball, but I'm not here for a gunfight, and I'm not coming out till those guys leave." They could hardly get me on the floor afterwards, even after the Guardia went back to their corners.
Gerald, you can't see this, but I'm looking at both Bill and Mark right now, and their mouths are both wide open in astonishment. I mean,
you're like a cat. You have 9 lives, and they used, I think, 4 or 5 of them. So you got 4 more left.
Oh yeah, I got a few stories. I've been a very active person my whole life. Jumped off of everything from 60-foot cliffs. We had to fight the rattlesnakes to do that, but those are all from growing up in Eastern Oregon.
That's normal.
Yeah.
From growing up in Eastern Oregon, I think my grandparents, I don't know if my grandparents ever told us no to anything.
I think actually being a country person is important, because I think if you were a city person, you would have died one of those times. I think.
Oh, I'm sure I would have.
Yeah, being up from the country, I think it makes you tough, and I think that's why you survived.
Yeah, I was haying at 13.
Oh my God.
I was so tall, I was running around with the 15, 16-year-olds who all were haying, and we'd hay all day and then go across the street from my grandparents. They lived in town, and the principal would turn on the lights, and we'd be playing ball at night. That's what made me tough, playing with a bunch of cowboys that were 2-3 years old. I mean, they just whipped my booty. Every night they whipped my butt, come out there bloody. And I finally grew up and got a little stronger and decided I was going to be the whooper instead of the whoopee.
Good.
How much of all these situations that you've been through, how much have they changed you and made you a different person?
Ooh, every one of those events has just brought me to where I'm at now. I felt invincible when I was young, and I feel invincible now. I think that's what we don't understand, that we're all actually invincible. We are great beings, all of us.
I think you need to write a book and call it Invincible.
That's the fruition of all this. Yeah.
I
should write about the time two or three times I've been dead.
Are you a religious person, Gerald?
Ooh, spiritual. I wouldn't say exactly religion. I wouldn't say I was a serious Christian for a while, but you could call me a Buddhist. I believe in all the ascended masters. I understand now that every religion, I've backed up enough now that every religion looks exactly the same. Fact is, there's a book out by a cardinal and a Buddhist monk that parallels Buddhism and Christianity right down to the letter. Fact is, I think the 6 years that they say Jesus was lost, the Indians from India don't think he was lost. He was over there taking classes from the gurus over there. Teachers, the sadhus.
I think you and Walton now would be best buds
Yes.
you're
Big
both
time.
really
He doesn't
spiritual.
realize it now.
Yeah.
He came to Oregon, and I thought, he fit more in Oregon than I expected. I thought, he doesn't know I should have been on that team with him. We'd had a great time. I'm very esoteric.
So we do this trivia segment called 50-50 on the show, and I give you a 50% chance to answer a question.
And I got to guess, yeah.
Yeah, and you get from 50 years ago, and this one will be really easy, at least I think. Okay. True or false, in 1974, 50 years ago, there was a young basketball player who was just starting, I believe, at North Eugene High School.
Ooh,
True or false?
Got your answer.
Danny Ainge was yes. I was going to say before he was an executive, a player with the Celtics, with BYU. Yes.
Barney Holland. Yeah, Barney Holland was a buddy of mine at North Eugene coaching Danny. And I'd played against his older brother, Doug. And Barney had me going over there during the summer teaching the kids. So I was I'll tell you a real story. I was the one that should recruit Danny. And I told Harder that because I knew him. I'd already known him for 2 or 3 years. And when he comes, he's talking to me and he's telling me he's going to come. And he's like, what is his chances? I was like, oh, what, making the team or starting? And he was a little offended. And he goes, why don't you think I'll start? And I said, look at what we have. I said, you don't play enough defense right now. You come out of high school. I said, you don't play enough defense to barely make it on the court, but a couple of minutes. But he goes, well, what would you do if I do? I said, you're either going to learn to play defense or you better go to BYU. And that's just what I said, because Frank Arnold, who had recruited me at Oregon, went to BYU, and I almost went to BYU because I liked Frank. And Belko had resigned, and we didn't know who was coming. And when they fingered Dick Harder, I kind of looked into it and thought, wow, I'd like to play for that guy. He did well at Penn, and that's how I got there. But I was
so BYU
gone.
should be thanking you then.
Yeah.
Retire his jersey.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing wrong with being an Oregon Duck, Gerald, but there are only a chosen few who are a kamikaze kid. I can't thank you enough for giving us your time. We knew about some of these stories, but we didn't know about so many of the ones that.
But I didn't digress too much.
No, you know what? It's all about perspective, my friend, and those moments that you had in your life gave you perspective, and now you're able to pass that on to other people. And I can't thank you enough for sharing that, because a lot of people would just they just stay in their comfort zone and call it quits, and that's not inside you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me and giving me a platform just to talk about my basketball experiences and life experiences, and hope your podcast does as good as you guys seem to be doing, because I've enjoyed it.
Gerald, you're an amazing man.
Yeah, we've really enjoyed
You're
having you.
amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gerald.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
You too. Enjoyed it.
So there you have it. I mean, when you do these kind of things, you have no idea, really, what you're getting into. A lot of these times for me, you're hearing of these people for the first time. I mean, like I said, I was 6 years old when this happened, when they played the game. The game seems to have really taken a back seat in this conversation. And these guys, I mean, everybody has a story. Everybody.
What I'm saying is that you, Scott, when you came up with this idea past our prime, It was like, well, okay, sounds good. But when you get guys back from that era, they want to talk about what they've done. They want to rehash incidents. They want to go back. From Gerald right there, you could tell he enjoyed every part of it. Mind you, those stories were absolutely unbelievable. But that's what I'm saying. That's the exact reason why we started this.
He's going to live to be like 145 years old.
I hope so.
It's just...
And eventually he'll be best friends with Walton because Walton will be 145.
Yes.
Boy, but
that's what we need to do. We need to get Walton and him together.
Yeah,
I
thinking the
really
same thing.
think they would be buddies now.
So we're thinking the same thing. One, I wanted to find out what would he say to Walton right now, but I just, he was just, you could tell Walton and him are the same guys.
Yeah.
Very
They
spiritual.
would be the same guys.
Yeah,
Everyone
and
experienced
and
life.
there's something about, literally, they have a shared experience that nobody can relate to, really. They were on the court at the same time, battling each other when UCLA was in this midst of this unbelievable run. And there's, 5 guys that Walton went up against that beat him?
Yeah, that's right.
And Bill got the better of him more often than not. Don't get me wrong. But they
Not
can
on
look
that
each
day.
other in the eye and know what they went through on the court. And then, Bill's a different guy now, too, than he was. We
Right.
all are back 50 years ago. I can't imagine that those two guys would not hit it off.
Yeah.
Wow, what an unbelievable story. Thank you, Gerald.
He electrocuted himself.
And
And
lived
lived
and had an outer body
doing a simple
experience.
dishwasher
His
thing.
poor mother,
Yes.
right?
I'm
Sitting there experiencing this as his son is going through this trauma, and then he's basically a patient for the next 15 years.
Yeah, all folded up.
And now here he is in his early 70s, and you said he thinks he's in the prime now because he got gypped out of so much time.
Yeah.
And here he is, almost not a full recovery, but 66 and a third.
We have like 2 separate podcasts here. Gerald Willett, the basketball player, Gerald Willett, the survivor.
For this man to survive not just that, but several other near-death experiences is just unbelievable. Yeah.
Phenomenal. Moving on. Track and field, the weekly track and field article from Sports Illustrated. And this one had a different tone in that they were trying to find out if a professional track league could make it in the United States. And the question was, will pro track make it? And really the me growing up, I was a big track fan every 4 years.
Yeah.
Right? It's the Olympics, and here's Edwin Moses, and here's Carl Lewis, and Bruce Jenner,
Ben Johnson,
and then the next 3 years, I was like, oh, what are these guys doing for the next 3 years, right? So they tried to have it where they were, and they had like 11,000 people come out to the Nassau Coliseum, and a guy named Ben Gypsho won 2 races. He won two Friday night and another 2 on Saturday night down in Baltimore, and he won $2,100, $500 for each race, and then $100 for setting a record. And they were really excited that this might become something, but there just wasn't enough. They couldn't get all for that to work. You have to get all the great track stars.
Right.
And Dwight Stones, when they tried to get him, was quoted as saying, "Why would I do it? Why would I take a cut in salary?" Meaning, as an amateur, he was getting paid under the table more than these pro guys were. And so I think it lasted like into 1976, and then it was canceled.
Yeah,
So.
it's just hard to have especially when you're competing back then with baseball, football, basketball, hockey. It's just impossible. But what I really liked about this runner from Kenya, Gypcho, is that it was the first time he'd done an indoor race, I think, and he won it, which is like, whoa. And then he ended up, I think, prior in 72, he won like a silver in the steeplechase, which to me is like, I believe that's the Olympic event where you literally have to touch the top of the hurdle and then you jump over it, which is to me really
right. Do you jump over water?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
never
and
knew
water,
that
it's
until
like-
I read that article. I always heard the steeplechase, and I thought, okay,
That's like what horses would
Yeah,
do.
that's
and stuff
right,
like that. It's
that's
like
right.
and make human beings do that.
I just like Gypsho. He said they talked about getting the money, for the event, and he said money doesn't make you run fast; it makes you run first. Yeah.
Good thinking there, Gypcho. Next up, gasser of a race at King Richard's Place. And this was the Daytona 500, the biggest race in NASCAR, and maybe the biggest name in the history of NASCAR, winning the Daytona 500, kind of, right, Bill?
Yeah, because there was a gas crisis that year. Mark, you remember that, don't you?
Yes, I do.
I do remember that as well. It was the Daytona 450 because they had to cut it down because of gas costs.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because they had two. So they had the one here in the 70s, and then they had one in the late 70s. And I remember I was a student at UCLA, and you could only gas your car it was even or odd days depending on your license plate. So what you do, you get in the gas line, and it'd be like 45 minutes, an hour long. So I would study. I get my book out. That would be like my library. My car became my library as I waited to gas my car. Think about it now. You just pull up into a gas station and do it. Back then, you couldn't.
But I was looking back at that. Richard Petty won. He collected $36,000, which at the time, that's quite a salary. But in 2015, Joey Logan, $1.58 million. It's amazing, and I'm sure what it is now. It's just the money.
It's not going down.
No, it's not.
Neither's the cost of living.
Yeah. The fact that they shortened that race caused attendance to be a little lower, but they also think it was because, once again, of the gas crisis. A lot of people come in their motorhomes, and motorhomes get like 5 miles to the gallon. So a lot of people didn't show up. But yes, King Richard Petty, he won for the 5th time. He would end up winning 2 more, and his 7 Daytona 500 wins, or actually 6 Daytona 500s and 1 Daytona 450 are still a record to this day, and the most ever, and hence the name King Richard. The Westminster Dog Show. Now, could argue, is that a sport?
To the dogs, it is.
Yeah, and to the people that do it, it is.
Well, maybe not to the dogs, to the
It's
owners.
been to the owners that do it, it is. I went to one of those in Vegas. Those people are.
Oh, they're competitive.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
You think of Best in Show.
Right.
I've seen the movie, but yeah.
But anyway, the story about this isn't necessarily who won, but is how a dog becomes a breed. And there were 4 new dogs that were given breeds or allowed to become breeds, and there's a long process that you have to go through in order for that to happen. But at the time, Billy, how many breeds were there and how many are there now?
There were 300 dogs and 45 breeds back then. That's quite a few. Nowadays, there's 2,500 dogs and 300 breeds.
Wow.
And 20 years from now, you can just double that. I mean, it's amazing that so many things that they've obviously been able to breed a lot more dogs.
And the American Kennel Club has this, like I said, they have this process where you have to start what's called a stud book.
Yeah.
And then you have to start taking pictures of these dogs and of it goes 3 generations. You have to have their offspring and then their offspring. And then they basically at one day go, all right, that's a breed. and so that year, the Ibiza Hound, the Pharaoh Hound, the Tibetan Spaniel, and the Staffordshire Bull Terrier were all welcome to the club.
I just remember back a friend of mine many years ago he was trying to breed a dog. It was a bulldog and a Shih Tzu.
A what zoo?
I'm sorry, that's from Dumb and Dumber. I'm sorry. It's a bullshit. I'm sorry. I watch a lot of fun movies.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Oh, my God. No, but I mean, USA Network used to do the Westminster
They
Dog
did.
Show, and it'd be one of their highest rating things. People went crazy.
They did.
But the story I remember the most was I was at CBS, and I was working with Keith Overman, and they ran this soundbite from the lady whose dog won whatever division it was. And they asked, so how did you select this dog? And the lady just looked at the reporter and very calmly, and I'm saying what she said, a word I don't condone, okay? But what she said, I looked at the bitch and said, you're it. And Keith
That's how I got married.
Yeah. Keith came out of that and just looked at the camera and said, Isn't that what got Mike Tyson in trouble? So I was like,
I'm just kidding, Amanda.
yeah.
Next up, I like this next article. It was called Bull Blades from Sea to Sea, and it was a diary of a week in hockey. And it started in Oshawa, Ontario. And a guy named Bill Laheed, who was going to be the next Bobby Orr. Lahead?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Because that's where Bobby Orr first made an impression with the Oshawa Generals, I believe. Didn't happen for Lahead. He did make it to the NHL.
Yeah.
There's nothing. Look, I always
number
love
one
when
draft pick, a number 9 in the draft by Red Wings. So
had a few good years with the Red Wings, and then fizzled out.
you score 1 point in the NHL, and you're
You're right.
good.
Absolutely. Monday they went to the Beanpot tourney in
I love
Boston.
that.
That's a huge thing in
Have you
in
been to one of
Boston.
those?
I never went. No.
Okay.
No.
So it's Boston University, go Terriers. Right?
Yeah.
They have the most wins in the Beanpot, 31. Boston College has 20. Harvard has 11. And Northeastern has 8 titles. But what I always remember about this is, everybody remember the classic movie Love Story? Ally McGraw, Ryan O'Neal. Love is never having to say you're sorry. Get your tissues out. Anyway, like they're at Harvard.
sorry.
Thank you. And they're at Harvard, and I think the Ryan O'Neal character was playing hockey or whatever, and it's the Harvard hockey team and stuff like that. So that's what I always associate with it.
I hear
If you ever want to see a movie, you cry at the end. Yes,
You're a sapster.
Yeah, you watch it, you'll be crying at the end of that movie.
We need to hold hands right now.
I love this quote from the Harvard coach Billy Cleary, who said in the locker room, "I wouldn't walk across the street to see a professional hockey game." Well, the night before, he walked across Causeway Street from Harvard and went to a professional hockey game.
So he's a liar, too.
Harvard beat BC 11-6. The next week, they beat BU and won the Beanpot. The next day, they go to a Squirt League game in Chicago. And Coach Mike Krolick brought his 7-year-old daughter Melissa to the rink, and his wife said, if she's going to be spending so much time at the rink, I want her playing. Well, there were no girls allowed. So Coach Mike decided, you know what we'll do? We'll get her dressed at home, and then we'll put a helmet on her, as she gets out of the car, and she'll play, and we'll call her Mike. And she did, and she played the whole year for the team, and the team had no idea until it came time for the banquet, and Mom made her wear a dress to the banquet. And she said, the boys never knew I was a girl, and they wouldn't know now if my mother hadn't made me wear a dress to the banquet last year. You should have seen the look on their faces. So, love that little tidbit. Next, they tried to go to see a game out west and see a guy by the name of Andy Hebington, who was 44 years old. In 22 years, he had played 1,652 games, only missing 2, including a then NHL record 630 consecutive games. Andy played that game that they were going to, but the photographer and the writer for the story, their plane was canceled due to a snowstorm, and so they missed the game. So they missed 1 game, and Andy's missed 2 in 22 years. Instead, they got to Santa Rosa in time for the game on Thursday. And Bill, do you remember what awaited for them in Santa Rosa that day?
I do not. What's
that was the home of Charles Schultz.
That's right.
Charles Schultz, the famous creator of Peanuts, had a $2 million rink called the Snoopy Place. And Schultz was from Minnesota and loved hockey and played into his 50s. In fact, he played on a 40 and over team in the Senior Olympic tournament and took a beating. But the thing I thought was funny, I was like, I remember Charlie Brown playing football.
Right.
Right? The classic
Not being able to
Lucy,
kick the
right?
ball.
Lucy.
Baseball, he was a horrible pitcher.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't remember him lacing up the skates. Do you guys remember
Maybe
him?
a Christmas episode,
right?
but no, I don't remember.
So, anyway, they went...
I was going to say about Schultz.
Yeah.
He had to throw parents out of the game. One
As a
parent
ref,
came up and
right?
said,
Yeah.
he was a ref. And he said one of the parents called him a creep. And so he threw her out of the game. He said, that's way too personal. So he took garbage on the ice from the players, got beat up, and from the fans when he was a ref. That's Charles Schultz, man.
Right. I think he said something to the effect of, you're a creep, Schultz. And he said, if you had
Yes.
called me a ref, I'd be okay.
Yeah, that's right.
But he called me
Yeah,
Schultz, and
Schultz,
that's
yeah,
too
too
personal.
personal.
Yeah.
Yep.
From there, they flew to Minnesota and saw a 2-time state champion Hibbing High School play their game. It ended in a tie. And from there, they go to Jonestown, Pennsylvania, and they're in a dressing room, and there's a picture of Bobby Orr. And the GM of the Binghamton Broomdusters says, that kid has some good moves. He'd get us into the playoffs for sure. That GM was Ron Orr, Bobby's older brother by a year. And I love this, right? He's the GM of a minor league hockey team. So the game ends in a 4-4 tie, which was a good win or a good tie for them. They needed that to get into the playoffs or something like that. He's the GM, mind you. After the game, what does he do? He calls 3 TV stations, 2 radio stations, 2 newspapers, all to let them know. He's also like their PR guy. He's letting them know how the game went. Those smaller teams, even now, those people do a little bit of everything. And he said the one job he still had to do now is he goes, I have to buy the beer for the 6-hour bus ride back home. Right. So let's see. We have anything from the people section. You guys, Billy?
No.
Mark? I thought
No.
you had something in the people. I
Was
know
the
there was
Leeds-
something
was
on
the Leeds coach?
There was something on boat building, and I decided
Americans build boats real well. That's all I got.
And ski styles.
nice.
No, the ski styles, yeah, that's the skiing for hot doggers. They wear bright clothes and do fun tricks, which what does it seem like they do? What is it nowadays? It's called the X Games.
There you go.
That's right.
So it's precursor to the X Games.
Absolutely.
And then they had the soccer article.
Yeah,
on,
the Leeds.
Yeah.
So the Leeds soccer. Go for it, Mark.
Well, I mean, this guy was like the most dominant coach back then. Leeds was a powerhouse. Now you think of, Arsenal, Man U, Man City,
Don Revy.
Chelsea.
Yeah.
Leeds. I mean, they had at the time of the article 28 games without a loss, and I ended up at 29. I think the streak, which was just he was the head coach Don Revy from 61 to 74. So I think that was his last year.
That was his last year.
Yeah. But they were just a dominant, English football league team.
He also changed their name. They used to be the Peacocks. He changed them to Whites. And they're
Wait, he
still
wasn't a
known as the
fan?
Whites nowadays.
He wasn't a fan of NBC? Is that
Evidently not.
Okay.
Evidently.
All right.
Ding, ding, ding. So,
The ABA, one of the better teams in the NBA was the Utah Stars. They won the championship in 1971, had a good team. Ron Boone was on that team. Ron Boone was known as the Iron Man of basketball. I think he set the record for most games played consecutively. But really the one thing they did, they had success for 4 or 5 years in a row, really good team, but they paved the way for the New Orleans Jazz to relocate and, become the Utah Jazz, which once again is if anyone wants to know how come the Utah team is called the Jazz, there's your answer. They came from New Orleans.
Well, but also the Utah Stars didn't start in Utah. You know where they came from?
Tell me, Mark.
They came from Los Angeles. It was the Los Angeles Stars, which makes perfect sense.
Now that makes
so
sense.
Utah just doesn't. Utah takes the Stars from L.A., the Jazz from New Orleans. Wouldn't they want, the Tabernacles or something?
Right.
Come on, the history of LA ABA teams. You had the Anaheim Amigos, I think the first year in the league. That one bye-bye.
Muy bien.
LA Stars, which I think Channel 11, might have done a few of their games. And then they went to Utah.
And you had the Conquistadors.
The San Diego Conquistadors, coached by Wilt Chamberlain.
Yeah.
I could get those games on the radio.
The final article in the magazine is written by one of my favorite writers ever, Frank DeFord, and it's the rights and wrongs of spring. I'm not going to get too much into it. It's basically about how the Northerners in the East Coast really looked forward to spring training and the truck day.
Still do.
Because it was, basically meaning spring is coming, thank God, and this white stuff that's on the ground will finally be over. But I thought it was great. He wrote that all the spring training cliches. The three of us have covered spring training for 25 plus years now. We go down to Arizona every year, and have had some great time covering spring training baseball. And you have that pitcher that goes 2 1/3 innings and gives up 7 runs, and then you go and have to get post game from this guy. And Bill, what's his answer? What does he say after giving up 7 in 2 1/3 innings?
I was just working on stuff today. Yeah. Everything's looking good. I felt good out there. Wasn't making my pitches. Just I'll come back. I'll come back next week, and I'll be ready to do it again.
Not too concerned right now with results.
Yeah.
Just trying to get my work in, get stretched out.
Yeah.
I was working. I got my ass kicked. That's what I was working on.
Yeah,
I can do it. Whatever Javier Vasquez did, that he gave up 7, 8 runs one time. I came and interviewed him, and he goes. We said, oh, you got pretty hard. Hit pretty hard. He goes, I didn't get hit hard at all. I said, well, it was like, one of the writers goes, well, 7 runs, 11 hits. He goes, they didn't hit me hard at all. I don't even know what happened out there. Like, okay, well, see, even better.
Yeah. So getting posts from those guys. Not always the best, but I loved the bulletins in the papers would announce, while most of you guys and gals will be plowing through the snow this morning, the advance guard of the Red Sox will be shoving off from the South Station aboard the Orange Blossom Special bound for Sarasota and the 1938 training season. You got to remember, there was no NBA back then. Yep. The NHL was, doing well, but not. I mean, baseball was king.
Yep.
So the thought of baseball was bigger than basketball and hockey.
It's just the world.
Just the possibility that they would. And one thing that players would literally go down there to get in baseball shape, because back then they didn't get these huge salaries.
They had jobs.
Yeah. They couldn't be working, and so they would go down there. They didn't get their salaries. I think this is still true now, until the season started. Spring training, they don't get paid. And they would get paid a $62 a week per diem. So
I like the one that was said about Hal McRae. Hal McRae went down there. He didn't have a contract. So he sat in the stands, and they negotiated the contract with him. He had no agent. So he was, same with Dick Drago. We're all sitting in the stands, not having a contract. They finally figured out what to sign him for, got to go play. That would never happen nowadays.
Right.
Never.
Something similar to that. I don't know if it was in this article, but Dom DiMaggio was watching Bobby Doerr, I think, take batting practice. And he was sitting there, and he wasn't supposed to be there yet. And he kept watching, he kept hearing the crack of the bat and stuff. And he's sitting next to his wife in the stands, and he goes, I'm going to go take some swings. And so he reported to camp. Finally, faces in the crowd.
Ron Marriott, I guess, the trampoline champ, U.S. trampoline champ, and he ended up winning a bronze at the '84 Olympics in springboard diving, which makes sense because you think about it, your trampoline, you're bouncing up and down, and the springboard, you're bouncing up. It gives a lot. It's not a platform dive, which is solid. So if you want to be a really good springboard driver, I guess start working on the trampoline.
Who knew?
Yeah, I was going to mention Gordie Howe had 4 goals in 3 games just a week in promo.
Yeah.
We're having Chuck Caton on. Chuck Caton was the Hartford Whalers announcer back in 79-80. Gordie Howe's last season. He played all 80 games that year. I mean, and he was 51 in that year when Caton announced him.
Gordie Howe will be on the cover, I think, of the March 10th or 11th issue of the 1974 issue of Sports Illustrated, and we'll have Chuck on to talk about his time with the 51-year-old Gordie Howe.
Yeah, it's just Gordie Howe and Tom Brady are just 50 years from now will just be looked on as not just great, amazing athletes at what they did, but the age they played to.
Yeah.
I mean, it
freaks of nature.
I just was going to mention in the letters to the editor that we had a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the honeypot shots. And that was a guy named Andy Sedaris, whose job at ABC was to go through the crowds and get honey shots of the good girls, good-looking girls in the stands. And Andy wasn't shy about saying where the girls were pretty and where they were not pretty. And he went after a few schools pretty hard, including Stanford. One guy wrote in by the name of Ed Snate and said, "Man does not live by honey alone. We at Stanford feel that a belief in human equality with respect to social, political, and economic rights should be a more highly regarded standard of beauty than a transient pretty smile or other commonly preferred superficial characteristics." And I can say with certainty, nobody likes Ed Snate.
Nope.
Wasn't he in Harry Potter?
So there you have it, guys. I mean, there's certain issues where there's a whole lot of different things in it, and it all holds up. And then there's other issues where the guest we have just supersedes everything else. And like you said, Bill, and you're never going to know who that is because of all the guests we've had, the two that I honestly could say I had never heard of are Bob Thomas and Gerald Willett. And man, were they both exceptional. So thank you to Gerald for coming on today. Any parting thoughts?
I'm just saying, when Gerald was talking, you were 100% right. My mouth was agape. I just started thinking, this is, Mark had it right. It's a movie. I mean, he's telling stories about going down 32,000 feet in a plane, being electrocuted, having an army on a basketball court. And then you lose your eye or get damaged to your eye playing badminton. Unbelievable.
And this is why I don't do odd jobs around the house. So,
very good, Mark.
Nice.
I have a perfect excuse. Next time I'm asked, hey, can you go change that light bulb? I'll say no, because I remember when Gerald tried to do it, this happened.
Yeah.
Okay, no more taking trash out from me.
No. Hey, next week, a classic cover with Jimmy Connors and Chris Everett on the cover. Curry Kirkpatrick wrote that article 50 years ago. We'll talk with him about what it was like to cover two of the game's top players who were dating at the time. Unbelievable time in tennis. So until next week, for Bill, for Mark, for Jeremy, our technician, I'm Scott Johnston signing off for Past Our Prime.
See ya.
See ya.